What was the most shocking thing you heard the quiet kid say? In class he asked the woman teacher if he could go to the toilet. She sternly replied, "You've got 2 minutes, Richard." And Richard says, "2 minutes? It takes me that long to unravel it." Teacher goes red and everyone loses it. That kid is an absolute legend. Richard for president. We were having a Bulls elective course and we ran out of stuff to do, so we wound up having story time. My friend walks up to the front and starts telling us about how he once got pretty badly injured. Basically he was walking into his friend's house, slipped on some black ice, faceplanted on it and his front teeth tore off most of his front lip and broke off. He ran into the house babbling and bleeding. He was like 11 and was missing part of his face, so he wasn't 100% coherent at the time. And his friend's mom takes one look, runs into her bedroom, locks the door and doesn't do anything until my friend's dad arrives and starts screaming at her. My friend says he still has no idea why the grown adult woman couldn't handle the situation any better, and we all start making guesses and Bull's psychoanalysis. Cue the quiet kid raising his magnificent head and blessing us with enlightenment. Maybe she just needed to finger herself real quick. So this one kid, who barely ever said 2 words, one day asks the teacher for the time. It was at some after school thing and there was no clock. The teacher says the classic time for you to get a watch, which for some reason was funny to everyone else. The quiet kid doesn't laugh. He looks the teacher dead in the eyes, and once everyone quieted down, he says, "So are you gonna tell me the frickin' time, or what?" We were in like 7th grade. Can't blame him. Can't tell you how many times I've heard that stupid joke. In class we were studying genetics and one guy was being a real douche and the teacher couldn't get him to shut up. Then after discussing inbreeding and dogs, one quiet kid raises his hand and says, "So is this likely how Peter, douche, became so freaking retarded? I've got a friend like this. I relate him to a sniper rifle. He doesn't make comments like that often. Maybe once every month or 2, but every one of them is goddamn glorious. It's an art." Most people would then try to carpet bomb the conversation with forced jokes trying to get the same response. This douchebag kid who constantly fricked with people was in line with the quiet kid and the quiet kid's friend. The quiet kid is a bit overweight, so when he gets up to the lunch lady and gets his chicken nuggets, the douchebag says, "You don't want extra nuggets, big guy?" The quiet kid out of nowhere just starts ranting. "No, I am all set, but what are you up to this weekend? You wanna hang out, grab some food, maybe frick a bit? I like to be on top and you look like a bottom. What do you say, wanna frick tonight?" The entire line is dead silent. The douchebag starts getting all pee off and acting like he's gonna start a fight, and the quiet kid says, "Okay fine, you can be top, baby." The douchebag kid leaves to the entire line laughing their asses off at his expense. No idea if the quiet kid was gay or he just knew that even jokingly suggesting the douche kid was a homosexual would upset him more than anything. But I do know he left the line with his delicious chicken nuggets and a huge smile on his face. Freaking Trevor Phillips right there. Quiet guy I worked with never said much until he came up to me and asked what happens when an Eskimo comes. Before I get the chance to respond, he throws a handful of ice at me and walks away. It's so much funnier if you're a normally quiet person, which I'm not, but I'm still using this. In junior high in the mid-80s, the game Trivial Pursuit was all the rage. We played it in math class one day and this kid, Gary, who never said anything at all, totally spanked everyone else by answering every single sports related trivia question. He got a lot of attention for it and I believe he walked a little taller after that day. I don't think I ever heard him say anything else, but I did see him sitting on the bleachers at a few sports events. It was the moops. At school, having just shown me the scope for supposedly his sniper rifle, if the fire alarm ever goes off and you can't find me, don't use the doors as an exit. Well, he was nice enough to warn you. The quiet kid from my grade stood up one day, grabbed a broom, stood on a chair and began trying to swat bees that got inside. One bee landed on the window where quiet kid proceeded to yell "Die bee die" and then swatted and shattered the window. He screeched when it happened and then sat back down. Never heard him speak again. That man is going to Valhalla after a bee related incident. One of my students hardly said a word all year until a couple weeks ago. I was trying to get a group of talkative ones under control and she had enough. She yells out, "Shut the frick up. I am trying to work, you fricking buttholes." Awkward silence followed because I didn't know how to handle the normally studious and quiet one losing it. I was like this in middle school. Not exactly quiet, but I never really socialized except with people right beside me in the form of asking for a pencil. One day the classroom douche happened to be more douche-y than I could stand for and I stood up out of my seat and yelled at him and sat back down. The entire class fell silent, but he never got that douche-y again. I was best friends with the quiet kid in middle school. It wasn't so much shocking as the stupidest thing I've heard him say. He got this 1,000-yard stare all of a sudden and just said, "I can't remember what color my dog is." Similar to a friend of mine, the thing about rain is that it makes mud. My dad is very quiet, to the point that it makes most people uncomfortable, even me sometimes. One day, we're at the park and a woman walks past us and my dad quickly says, "What if I punched that woman in the face and said, 'Sorry, I thought you were my wife'?" That's my kinda humor. In high school, there was this really quiet girl named Grace. She was a pleasant person, but wouldn't say anything more than hi or sorry unless you asked her something. Even then, she'd appear terrified. It was at prom, and I was in the parking lot of the venue we had prom at. I lost a contact and had to run to my car to grab my glasses. In the parking lot, Grace was smiling and walking from her car. She looked at me, laughed, and said, "Ryan, her prom date just fingered the frick out of me." I still laugh about it to this day. He started to attack someone in my class with a table when the teacher got a cup of coffee. That was quite something. I was in marching band in HS, probably 7 years ago now, and we had this huge muscular guy as our brass instructor. He would always yell at us to nail these chords or you're not playing loud enough. There was this little Asian trumpet kid that was so innocent and nice. He barely ever spoke a word. One really hot afternoon, our instructor was being especially loud and said, "Why don't the trumpets blow hard enough?" Dead silence across the field as all the brass are waiting for next instructions. Then we hear, "Why doesn't your mom blow this dong hard enough?" from quiet trumpet kid. Needless to say, we all laughed, got push-ups and laughed some more. Wow, literally this question came at a perfect time. I was just thinking about this and it was by far in sophomore year of high school. This kid was so odd that honestly no one ever really noticed him. But one day he's sitting across from me at a table and he sees this one girl in really tight shorts and goes, "Goddamn, I could have my head up her butt for months." It was pretty shocking. Dude could have worn her like a hat. I went to middle school and high school with this boy named Daniel. Never once heard him say a word. A friend of mine said he would whisper sometimes. The night of our senior party we heard some music coming over from the corner where the karaoke machine was set up. At first no one really noticed him because people had been singing on it all night and most people stopped paying attention. But this was different cause no one was singing and the music was playing. The DJ stopped the music and started the song again. Daniel was standing there looking frightened, but this time around when the song started he began to sing. Everyone in the room stopped what they were doing and just crowded around him. He wasn't a great singer by any means, but 99% of the people in the room hadn't ever heard him talk. When the song was over everyone started clapping and cheering and he walked away with a big smile on his face. This is probably the best thing I've read all night. I hope everybody has a night like this, where they defy everyone's expectations, and maybe even their own, and just freaking go for it. He walked onto that stage a mouse and strutted off as a lion. I hope everyone can be a lion once. In kindergarten, there was this kid, Donatel, and he never said a word. He was nice enough, played games and everything, but completely silent. One day we were looking out the classroom window as a cop drove by. Donatel opens his mouth and says, "Police car." At the time, we were all excited to hear him speak, but looking back, the kid must have had some real dark history. Living in a sewer with 3 brothers and a talking rat who forces you to do karate all day does that to you. In high school, I had first level Spanish with this kid who was super quiet. At the end of the year, we all had to give a speech in Spanish in front of the entire class. This mother stood up and gave a speech, not in Spanish, but in a language that he had spent the entire year inventing. Kid, I've never heard you say anything loudly. You need to shout something out. Quiet kid. What? Kid, shout something. In the middle of a classroom, a full-blown high-pitched roar is heard. Quiet kid. Christmas. It was a Muslim kid who didn't even celebrate Christmas. What a dude. Man, Christmas sucked for Muslim kids at school. Teacher would usually bring little gifts, get super paranoid that I'd be offended and hasten to find something religiously neutral as opposed to the gift everyone else got. Frick kaleidoscopes. Playing rugby, H fails completely at line out. Someone shouts jokingly, does anyone know any good H to replace Patrick? Quietest guy on the team, never hear him say anything. Maybe Patrick's mum can help. Proceed to fall on floor. Or man, H jokes, I miss rugby. So this isn't so much what he said. The seniors played locker pinball with the underclassmen. It's exactly what it sounds like. They bounced one little guy constantly, made him late for class a lot because they'd keep him bouncing so long. Well, one day they were bouncing him and he super politely said, please stop, you're hurting me. Obviously the seniors bounced him harder. Apparently that was this kid's breaking point because he leapt onto the nearest senior. We just happened to be our star basketball forward. The little freshman bit into the senior's neck and literally tore a mouthful of skin off. He just stood there with this piece of bloody skin on his shirt growling at everyone. Needless to say, no one ever fricked with Mad Dog Mike after that. Holy crap. My butthole is this big while making a circle with her fingers. Jeremy. This guy was so silent that we believed he was a mute. The school had just recently painted the bins in all kinds of weird styles. As our group was walking somewhere at lunchtime, we passed a bin that was covered in handprints. He offhandedly goes, that bin is handy, leaving us dumbfounded at his pun bomb. Thought this was going to be a Pearl Jam joke. We sat in the classroom in I think 5th grade. My friend had done a PowerPoint presentation about Eminem. He talked about that he lived in a trailer as a young boy, and the quiet, straight A student stands up and says just like you, and asks to use the toilet. No one understood anything of what just happened. We live in North Europe. It's practically no one that lives in a trailer here. My friend didn't. Nothing. Let me explain. I took a class with Sung Hui Cho, the Virginia Tech shooter, one semester before the shooting. The class was called Contemporary Horror. It was a one-time elective offered by my favorite professor. We read horror novels and watched horror films and discussed the craft of creating scary stories, but also how they reflected or represented their era's fears. It was a great class. There were only about 15 students and it was discussion heavy. Cho was one of them. I honestly never noticed him, even in that small class, until halfway into the semester. He wasn't quiet. He was silent. So on the day we all finally noticed him, our professor asked him something directly, and Cho just stared at him. I can't remember the question, but the nature of it meant silence was potentially an acceptable and funny response. So we all laughed, except Cho. He just kept staring at our professor. Our laughter awkwardly died, and after a few moments of uncomfortable silence, our professor just said, "Ooh, okay," and moved on. It was so strange. But I forgot about that weird moment until after his rampage. That professor later told me that Cho's papers had been disturbing, but the nature of our course meant the envelope was being pushed a bit, and it had never been bad enough to suggest he'd do what he did. That professor was a good man, and he admitted he struggled with not blaming himself on some level for one, not identifying how severe Cho's mental health problems were, and two, for the graphic and terrible nature of some of what we watched in that class, which may have inspired Cho. He knew that was bulls, but a part of him couldn't help but feel some blame. It was terribly sad. Well, this changes the tone of the thread. One thing I always say, as a quiet guy, is whenever people are talking about me within earshot, they usually say something like, "That Mixmaster Bone, he just never talks." Then I say, "No, but I hear everything." They all just kind of laugh awkwardly and slither away. I think it's weird how my lack of conversation is such a huge conversation starter. I've noticed this as well. It's like people think because I don't talk, I can't hear them talk. Couple that with being kind of conspicuously tall, and I hear a lot of things said by people after they think they've passed out of earshot and whisper things to each other. Most are innocuous, but sometimes people say stuff that makes me want to turn around and punch them in the backs of their heads. Our quiet kid was Tommy. Tommy never said anything ever. Out of all the lunches we ate at our table senior year, I think Tommy was the only one who never told a story or even added anything to the conversation. He just always sat in the same spot along the wall eating his lunch and laughing occasionally at our jokes. One day we were sitting in the cafeteria eating lunch and sharing stories like we always do. My friend Raymond had spent the previous night with a girl named Haley. She was 2 years younger, but already had a reputation of hooking up with a lot of different guys. So he was telling us everything that went down, kind of bragging, even though nobody was really impressed as we were aware of Haley's reputation. Anyways, Raymond gets done telling his story, then proceeds to pull out his sandwich. I think it was some sort of fish. It didn't look very appealing to Raymond or us, so he says this looks disgusting, but I'll give it a try anyways and proceeds to take a bite. In pipes Tommy, "Is that what you said about Haley last night?" Everyone explodes into laughter, drawing the attention of the entire cafeteria. Raymond is just sitting there, mid-bite, stunned. I'm bent over in pain from laughing. Others are on the floor. One guy ran to the bathroom because he thought he was going to puke from laughing. Even Ray had to laugh. I never noticed him laugh, but Tommy had this sly grin on his face the rest of the lunch hour. Perfect setup. Perfect execution. 10 points. I was, and still am, a geek and I got bullied a lot in school. The Columbine massacre happened when I was in 8th grade, and all of a sudden everyone started thinking a bit more carefully about the ramifications of spending years physically and psychologically torturing kids who were too small or afraid to fight back. I didn't make the connection at the time. The bullying kind of fizzled out for me in high school, and I just thought it was because everyone was getting more mature and empathetic and growing less clique-y. And I was delighted that some of the popular people were suddenly being so generous and friendly with me. It wasn't until one of these people asked me if I'd kill her if I brought a gun to school and shot everyone. I realized that a lot of the recent kindness the popular kids were suddenly displaying towards me was not necessarily coming from a genuine place. I was deeply insulted that anyone ever thought I would do anything like that, and deeply hurt that the other kids didn't actually like me. They were just afraid of me, and were being nice to me out of fear. A lot of the other established nerdy kids were in the same boat as me, including this one kid Pat. I didn't know him very well, but he was frail, pale, bespectacled, highly intelligent, and quiet as a church mouse. So he was already on my radar as a potential ally. We were in an SAT prep course together, and I started sitting next to him. He didn't say much of anything to me or anyone for a few weeks. Then, one day as we were all settling in and waiting for the teacher, one of the popular girls who was particularly bubbly and not particularly gifted with intelligence said, "Pat, I used to think you were going to come to the school and shoot everyone, but now I know I was wrong." Pat looked down towards his desk, stroked his chin thoughtfully, and said, "We'll see," and the rest is history. Pat and I are still close friends to this day. We were chilling at a bar in Prague and someone rolled up some hash oil and tobacco and passed it around. The quiet kid hit it and got even quieter. 20 minutes later some aggressive, growling black metal comes on and out of nowhere he yells, "Kill your parents." We frickin' lost it. He was pretty happy with himself. I think quiet kid just told you why he was quiet. The day I decided to not say stupid things was a very important day in my life. Before I knew it, I just didn't talk anymore. I'm the quiet kid. One day, before my economics class started, this guy turned around in his desk and asked me what I thought he'd be when he grew up. He never took anything seriously, and joked around a lot, so I answered, "Definitely a P-star." The girl next to me started laughing really hard, and even when class started, she didn't stop. The teacher walked over to her and asked her what she was laughing about. When she finally calmed down enough to answer, she said, "So Lucifer said that Daniel's gonna be a P-star," and the whole class heard it. Everybody, including my teacher, was staring at me, with shocked looks on their faces. I turned bright red and couldn't find any valid excuse for what I'd said, and that's why I never talk. Frick people who throw you under the bus. I wasn't there, but in my announcing techniques class, teaches you how to present yourself and speak for radio television. We were filming how-to videos in the studio, and the professor was telling us past examples of good and bad projects. One in particular was done by a very shy, awkward kid who came to the studio with a friend and a metal box. He so casually proceeds to pull a bunch of knives out of the box and film his video on the best ways to use the knives in combat with very specific and effective ways to kill somebody using his friend as a dummy. He was very volatile with his movements, and his friend apparently didn't even bat an eye. The professor then explained that despite how uncomfortable it made him and the rest of the class, he had to give him an A because his presentation was actually put together pretty well. That lie, he gave him an A cause he didn't want to get cut. An annoying friend, Dylan. Quiet kid, you're so freaking stupid sometimes. Dylan, at least I don't suck massive dong all the time. My name is Dylan and I used to be quiet. I honestly could have said this. Someone once turned to me and said, "Dude, you're always so quiet, like a serial killer or something." I immediately responded, "Thank you." Looks of shock and horror as I realized what I said. Me too, thanks. In college, our fraternity had a pledge who was clearly awkward with girls, but was otherwise a real cool guy. Normally, Dan was super proper and a bit shy when talking to girls, but not this night. On this night, when Dan was asked about what kind of girl he wanted to date, he told our sweetheart the kind of girl who loves to have her pee crushed. I'm not sure if Dan ever crushed any pee, but that line became a staple in our frat for a while. There was one girl in my school who I've only ever heard speak once the entire time I knew her. It was during lunch, and two black kids got into a fight. I heard her say, under her breath, "Freaking N." I will never forget this as long as I live. It was like perfect cinema in real life. This quiet, weird girl in 10th or 11th grade always wore this giant coat and looked messy. She was a bigger girl and had a sister who was super pretty and skinny and popular. As I type this out, I realize it sounds fake or like a move. Anyway, this big, awkward, quiet, friendless girl shows up at a talent show at the school. People weren't being obviously mean, but there was definitely an air of WTF when she came out on stage in her big messy coat and disheveled clothes. She sat at a piano and started to play and sing, and just, my god, it was surreal. She sang this haunting bluesy song no one had ever heard before and the auditorium just went dead silent. I distinctly remember tearing up, and I'm tearing up now 20 years later just remembering it. Who the heck knew? In middle school, the quiet kid, Steven, had an arch rival, Robbie. In class, Robbie always seemed to come out on top of their little scuffles, mostly because Steven couldn't really formulate or execute a burn or a comeback. He just rolled over and let Robbie get his insults in until the teacher stepped in. One day I was walking behind Robbie after that class and Steven quietly crept up behind him. Before Robbie could even turn around, he got as close as possible and said, "If I was to come into your house and kill you while you were sleeping, I doubt anyone would even notice." Then he disappeared into the darkness of the science hallway. I don't remember the exact words, but that was pretty dang close. I was about 55% shocked, 30% laughing hysterically on the inside, and 15% terrified. Robbie never made fun of old Stevie again. OMG, I know a Robbie and a Steven, and this is exactly how things would go down. Are you from WI, USA? A group of dudabras in my high school were talking about sexy women in class, and for fun they asked the quiet kid what kind of girls he likes. He says very seriously, dogs. Dudabras, haha, you're kidding. Quiet kid, number. I'm sexually attracted to dogs. He never spoke again. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.